So today, as Christy said, we just want to go over the Healthy and Hunger-Free or Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act, what that means for school nutrition programs, and then what's coming up next year in the competitive food rule. And it's called the Smart Snacks in Schools. I think you have a handout in your packet on it too. That doesn't start until July 1, 2014, so don't get hyped up and think, oh my gosh, I gotta go back. I just want to take a few minutes and reinforce and remind you guys what an important and good job you're doing. A lot of times school nutrition gets a bad rap, and many times school nutrition has been blamed for the obesity problem in our country. Kids only get about 35% of their calories from school, and that's the right amount. They're designed, as you all know, lunches are designed to provide 35% or about 1/3 of the calories kids need, and so they're getting that. I do think there's room for changes and ways that we can get better, and that you have a great opportunity today and tomorrow to do that. Jamie Oliver was right in that obesity impacts the quality of life. It increases our risk for chronic diseases, heart disease, diabetes, strokes, and some of those are preventable. He was right about the health care cost related to obesity, and if we can reduce that prevalence of obesity, decrease our health care costs, then our country's going to be in a lot better position to help those families that are at risk for hunger and continue the SNAP benefits and WIC benefits to those families that we know provide nutritious foods. So schools are a good place for kids to learn about food, and it's a good place for kids to get nutritious meals during the day. Because we impact so many children in our nation through our public school system. Federal law, and the most current one is the Healthy and Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, does require that school meals be consistent with the dietary guidelines for Americans. And that has been the case since about 1995, if you all will remember, the new school meal initiative and those kind of things. I've been in school nutrition since, let me have to stop and think about this, since 1988. I just happen to be at Oklahoma State right now. But the My Plate messages you're probably familiar with. Fill half your plate with fruits and vegetables, and our new skill patterns increase the fruit quantity and vegetable quantity and variety, so we have consistency there. The My Plate message, is to make half of your grains whole, and you know that in our new school nutrition, last year and this year, half of the lunch grains have to be whole grain rich. You guys have made some great progress this last school year in school meals. Everyone is using a food-based menu planning approach, which I've always preferred over the nutrient standard menu planning. How many used nutrient standard in the past? Back in 1995, when that became an option, I didn't feel like it provided students with a good role model of what a meal should look like. As long as the nutrients were in the meal, you could serve anything. So as an extreme example, if you serve gummy bears or some kind of side dish that looked like a gummy bear that were fortified with lots of vitamins and minerals, you were providing those to students, and I didn't think it was a good teaching tool. So I'm excited that the food-based menu planning option is the only option now for planning school meals. We have 3 grade groups, K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. That works for some of you. How many? And some of you it doesn't work very well for because you have maybe 8th through 12th grade eating at one site, or you might have 5th, 6th, and 7th at one site, but I think we're learning how to work through that. Vegetable subgroups at lunch are to be sure that we get a good variety, and you're learning how to do that. Half of the grains at lunch have been whole grain rich. USDA actually dropped the ranges, but you are required to serve a minimum number of whole grain rich servings, one a day and a minimum amount over the week. Weekly lunch meat alternate, that's low fat, fat-free, low-fat milk for lunch and breakfast, and lunch dietary specifications are being met for saturated fat, trans fat, and you're working toward reducing sodium. So you have made great progress already, and you're to be commended for that. So what do we have to look forward beginning July 1st, 2014, or 2013, which was the beginning of this month? We'll start using the food-based menu planning approach for breakfast. Those 3 grade groups will apply to your breakfast meals. Half of the breakfast grains, if they're not already, will have to be whole grain rich. Notice that I have the new offer versus serve rules at breakfast marked through. Last week I learned that USDA is backing off some of the breakfast requirements, backing off the implementation date. The plan right now is that some of these will not be required until July 1st of 2014. So we'll talk about those today. If you have questions, I did bring the regs or the guidance from USDA with me, so we may have to look it up together. But the new offer versus serve rule at breakfast will not be required this year at breakfast, not till next year. The dietary specifications for breakfast do go into effect, or did go into effect July 1. We'll talk about that. And then the new grain weights, and we'll give that a little bit more emphasis. So these are the things we'll be working toward this next school year. Mostly implementing healthy, hunger-free requirements to breakfast. Last year, our emphasis was lunch. In July 2014, so we have another year to continue to work with these, all grains must be whole grain rich, not just half of the grains. Does that make sense? Okay. The first sodium target will have to be met beginning next July, so continue to work on reducing sodium. USDA is working towards reducing sodium in their commodity foods because if you're used to eating a lot of salt and then bam, you taste something without salt, how's it taste? Yeah, not so good. But if you gradually get used to lower salt and then bam, you eat something that's really salty, it doesn't taste good either because it's too salty. So I think this is something we really need to work with, learn today and tomorrow about some gradual ways you can start backing off sodium. Competitive food nutrition standards, and this rule just came out, so it doesn't give it goes into effect next July. It doesn't give schools much time to get these implemented. It is kind of interesting because it is an interim final rule, and I've never really been aware of an interim final rule. So to me that says there still may be some opportunity for USDA to back off some of these rules. But right now, if they're not changed, what we're going to talk about later is what's going to go into effect. So our learning objectives for today are to review the common standards between school lunch and breakfast meals, identify the major provisions for the updated school breakfast program, since that's really what you're going to be working on this year, and then identify the key provisions of the brand new competitive food rule, also known as the Smarter Snacks in Schools. So the common standards, and I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. Is somebody given, you're gonna make me watch my time, good. We've already said food-based menu planning, you started using it last year at lunch. Sounds like all of you never changed from it. And it does apply for breakfast beginning this school year. You are required to identify the reimbursable meal at the beginning of the food service line with some kind of signage. How many of you have come up with something, if you have something? Okay, a few. Okay. And just to give Danielle a plug, this really is a behavioral economic strategy, because we're suggesting to students at the beginning of the food service line all the foods that they should have on their plate. It's a nudge without them even knowing it. This is just an example of one way you can meet that requirement. I do know that Department of Ed is going to have a brand new poster for every school site in the state. It's poster size, it has a tray on it, that you should be receiving when they make their first visits in the fall. So you have that to look forward to. 3 grade groups, K through 5. I think I said K through 6 a while ago. It's K through 5, 6, 7, and 8, and 9 through 12. We know that the meal patterns for K through 5 and 6 through 8 are somewhat similar. It's when we jump up to 9 through 12 that the quantities really increase. And you have to work with that. Dietary specifications, we have minimum and maximum calorie levels for each grade group. So that is a good way that we can make sure that kids are getting enough but not too much calories, and can lead toward our contribution to obesity prevention. It also leads toward those kids, we often forget about those kids in our state and our nation that don't know where their next meal is coming from. The school lunch that they get at school may be the last meal they get until they come back for breakfast the next morning. And that's really, really important to remember. So we want to be sure those kids are getting enough calories to be able to make it through the night. And that they're getting the right nutrients, and that they're getting enough fat so that they don't get hungry too fast and too quickly, because then that leads them to eat, if anything, what's available at home. Calories, saturated fat. Saturated fat typically is less than 35%. Let me say no. Saturated fat is less than 10% of the calories, total calories. Sodium is graduated. It's being phased in over 10 years. Our first target, like I said, is next July. And trans fat, no trans fat in the school meal unless it's naturally occurring. And the places where it might naturally occur in foods that we would typically serve in Oklahoma would be beef. I always laugh when I read the regulations, because it says in naturally occurring in foods like beef or lamb. And I would think, now what school in Oklahoma is serving lamb? Maybe in New Zealand or something, but not in Oklahoma. So your labels will let you know if the food contains fat. You should be writing, or trans fat, you should be writing your food specifications so that it says no trans fat unless it's naturally occurring. The problems where I think you might run into problems with that, or you really need to pay attention to, is if you're buying a pizza, like a hamburger pizza or any pizza with beef on it, it might show some trans fat on the label, and you'll need to be sure to get some kind of product specification from the company saying that that's naturally occurring and not in the pizza crust. We know that fruits and vegetables are now 2 different components. Before it was fruit and or vegetable. Now it's a quantity of fruit and a quantity of vegetable depending on the age grade group. Here's another change for breakfast. This year, fruit and vegetable is still one component at breakfast for this school year. Okay? Fruits, to help keep the sugar and the calories down, think about those My Plate messages, can be canned in fruit juice, water, or light syrup. If it's frozen, it should have no added sugar. It can be dried. Juice has to be 100% fruit juice served in the school lunch or breakfast program. The quantities are limited. It can't be more than half of the fruit requirement over the course of the week. And if you're serving dried fruit, just remember that a fourth of a cup, it counts as twice that much because it's dried. It doesn't have the water content in it. Does anybody still have commodity fruit, frozen fruit in your freezer that has added sugar? Okay. You can continue to use that until it's gone, but when you start purchasing frozen fruits, it needs to meet these specifications. These are the kinds of wording that need to be included in your food specifications when you're procuring food. Vegetables, fresh, frozen, without salt, canned, low sodium. As I mentioned, USDA is changing their formulations for fruits and vegetables so that you can meet these dietary specifications. Fresh leafy greens, 1 cup counts as half a cup because of the volume. And as with fruit, 1/4 of a cup of dried vegetable counts as a half a cup. Tomato paste and puree do count. And so all of those folks that get all bent out of shape about pizza counts as a vegetable, well, yeah, it can contribute to the vegetable component if it has enough sauce on it. But it also contributes whole grain, and it probably contributes some reduced fat cheese also. So some other healthy food items. I just always said they never know how we write the specifications, because when I was a child nutrition director in Edmond, I wasn't going to put low-fat pizza on the menu, because if I think about behavioral economics, that doesn't sound very good. So I'm just going to put pizza on there, and I know that I wrote the specifications for it to be low-fat and for the crust to be whole grain.